Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This morning, we have Pam Rushton, our county assessor, on with us. Unfortunately, she's having some technical difficulties, so we may do a redo of this in a couple months here. But we're happy to have Pam on with us so that she can give us a little bit of insights about the process and tax assessments, etc. And so once again, everyone, we're going to let Pam speak for a bit. And then if you have any questions, please put those in the chat or you can raise your hand. I'll call on you to ask your question. We like this to be fairly interactive, and we will get started here. So thanks so much for joining us, Pam. And I'm so sorry you're having technical difficulties and can't show your reports or even your face, your pretty face. So sorry about that. But go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Of course, I come in and listen to a lot of your presentations and they're great. What we have done in this last year is we've increased values considerably, probably one of the biggest increases we've had in probably since the crash happened. We increased values overall in the county about $1.3 billion. And the majority of that is just what the market's doing. And we're still low in a lot of cases because we don't use the 2021 sales in our analysis. We only use up to the December 31st of 2020 because our lien date is actually January 1st. So we will see probably some pretty good size increases next year too, because the market in 21 has just been kicking our tail. I mean, I go out myself and look at properties just to see if there's something there that we missed because of some of these sales coming through. But last year, our overall value in the county was about 10.6 billion. And this year it's about 11.9 billion, and that's for the entire county. What we do is we inspect 1/6 of the county every year, and we annually update the entire county. So we use the sales information. We can go up to the last 5 years. In this kind of a market, we don't need to do that. Usually we use the last couple of years, giving the most credibility to the closest to the lien date, which I said like is January 1st of 2021. So the increases that we're seeing this year are based on the market prior to that date. When the state, the Department of Revenue kind of grades us and keeps an eye on us to make sure that we're trying to stay at 100% of market, I feel that our ratio probably this year is going to drop into the 80s, mostly because they do use the first 3 months of 2021 in their analysis, which those sales are excruciatingly high. If anybody's familiar with the market, I know you are. I just got your report from your dad or from your brother the other day, and it showed about 11% increase, and we're seeing about the same thing, 8 to 10% in general. And we're conservative, as you know, when you look at your values, usually we're a little bit less than what the market was doing because we're using historical information. So this last year we went through the inspection area, which was the east side of Sequim, Diamond Point up into about the city limits of Sequim. We did the physical inspection. We made changes based on if people changed, up maintenance, remodels, things like that. We make changes based on that information. So we're always collecting data in 1/6 of the county. And then, like I said, we're using the sales information for the annual adjustments, and we make market adjustments based on that. Like this is one of the bigger increases we've made in the last few years. I can't tell you at this point what that's going to do to people's taxes. We added about $150 million in new construction. Our goal was to go out and pick up the newer houses because if you don't get those, the tax shift is much greater than if you miss a shed or something. So we wanted to make sure that the taxes are as distributed as equally and as uniformly as possible. So we go after the bigger stuff first because that does make the bigger impact on the tax shifts. This last year, I don't even know how to explain a market like this. The interest rates, I'm sure, have had a big impact on what's happening, and supply and demand. You know, we don't have the supply we used to have. I was looking at your brother's report again, and things are just not staying on the market. I watched houses around me be on the market for just a few days, and then next thing you see a sales pending up. And we see that same thing when we're seeing the sales come through. We all look at these enormous sales. We've had more over $1 million sales in the last year than I think we've ever had in Clallam County. And those are residentials. Those are not commercials. So the impact of that is huge on everybody. So you're going to see, not everybody's going to see an 8% increase. That is not the way it works. So I hate to talk in percentages, because different areas, we break the counties into different neighborhoods and look at similar neighborhoods for sales information. So different neighborhoods are going to be different. Some are going to see, a small increase. Some are going to see big increases. And in a handful of situations, you might even see a decrease from depreciation issues. It's really important that people know that if they remove something from their property, we only inspect once every 6 years, so they need to let us know by doing a destroyed property. Those are really important issues. Destroyed properties, if we don't know about them, we can't discover them. We've had a little bit of an issue getting some building permits this year from some jurisdictions. So if we don't know about the new construction, we can't pick it up. We've tried to do our best by the sales coming through. So there may be some new construction, primarily in the city of Port Angeles. They've had some technical difficulties also with their, I think they upgraded their permit plan. And so we haven't been getting all of the building permits like we usually do. So we picked them up. When we see a sale come through, we know there's an improved property on it. So we run back out and we physically actually measure all those houses up when we go out in the field like that. I've actually been back in the field this last year too, because we've been short-staffed. We lost a couple of appraisers right during new construction, which is a huge impact for us, because new construction is one of the few ways that your taxing districts can increase their levy to supply more services. So it's really important that we put those on there so the tax distribution is distributed better. Next year we'll be in the city of Sequim. That is called our cycle 2. Like I said, we have 6 cycles. It's the east side of Sequim, city of Sequim. Cycle 3 is in between Sequim and Port Angeles. Cycle 4 is the outskirts of Port Angeles on both sides. And cycle 5 is the city of Port Angeles and a little bit south of the city line. And then cycle 6 is the west end, and that's from Joyce all the way to the Boga Shield. So those are our cycles that we physically inspect. We also inspect new construction every year. And we pick up new construction as of where it was the completion of as of July 31st. So we don't necessarily wait till the house is complete and you're occupying. We will pick it up as a partial complete and then pick up the remainders in the following years when it's done. So some people will see it, if you see something that doesn't seem realistic and you're living in your house now, it's because we picked it up as a partial complete. And I always tell people when we're getting ready to send notices out, so tell all your friends and family, if they don't receive a notice from us, please contact us because their address may be incorrect. Sometimes people forget to let us know that they've moved into the house and they've used an address from the previous property on their REIT transaction. And that's what we take the information off of, is the REIT transaction for mailing. So I always tell people it's important. And I try to tell Todd at KOMP too to call me. If you're not getting notices, call me, because there's a reason. We either have an incorrect information or we use a mailing company and they've been really great. So I plan on having the notices to them within the next few days if things straighten out on the technical side here. And it usually takes them a week or 2 to get them in the mail. So I'm hoping they'll be out by the end of October. And then at that point, you'll have 30 days to contest your value with the Board of Equalization. I personally, I don't anticipate a lot of that this year just because of the 21 market has been so crazy. We'll see. We did make some changes in our office with land. The land was kind of dormant for a while. There wasn't a lot of land transactions for quite a while there. That has increased drastically and the prices have gone up a lot. So I have issued a single one of my single appraisers, I took them out of the field and put them on land only. So they've been analyzing land and trying to update our land values. So some areas will see bigger increases of land. You can't wave a wand and do the entire county, especially with land, because there's so many issues. They have to investigate a little bit. So you will see some bigger changes in the land values this year. And then there's been some new developments that have come through. Not as many as what we had early, at the end of the last boom we had, but they're starting to come through again. I don't know if there's any specific questions people would have about what we've done this last year. Like I said, I kind of gone over where we were at and the increases we've made. Can you think of anything, Colleen, that people would really like to hear about that maybe I'm not addressing? Because I couldn't pull any of my reports that I wanted to.
Let's see. I did have a couple of questions. You already answered one. The next area that you're going to investigate is SQUIM. And so can you share with us what areas have increased the most and which ones have been a little bit more flat?
Well, the entire county has been crazy. Normally Forks and the West End are a little more dormant. They have not been. Those values have probably increased as much as anybody in the county has. A few years ago, I remember we were looking for anything over 300,000 in Forks because we'd have very few sales, but most of those were on the river. Now they don't seem to need to be on the river anymore. It's been a very aggressive out there, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of questions from that area because that area has seemed to rapidly increased. Not that they were any different than anybody else. It's just that the sales are starting to show up that are very aggressive. SQUIM, of course, SQUIM has really been aggressive. A lot of new construction. Port Angeles itself has had increases, but we haven't had the new construction or the development that SQUIM has. We don't have the topography for it, for one thing. So yes, the developments in SQUIM, you're really seeing, these $200,000 houses are now selling for $450,000. And I'm using historical knowledge from what back when I was selling real estate, it was a $90,000 house. So it's been a few years since I sold real estate though. But the aggressions have been all through the county. I won't say any place has been dormant. Probably, like I said, SQUIM and Forks are going to see more aggressive multipliers on their values, only because we're trying to hit market. We use kind of a hybrid of information with the cost approach based off of Marshall Swift being our guidelines. And that's a company that does their cost approaches. I don't know that Marshall Swift could even keep up when the market was crazy with lumber packages. We did see some holding off when we were doing our new construction inspections. You saw several places that hadn't started or were waiting for lumber to come down. So, that was kind of hard because it was a waste of time because we have to show up at the property to see where they're at. And a lot of times they weren't even started. And I didn't blame them when CDX was what, $80 a sheet, $100 a sheet. That's ridiculous. So I can't tell you that there's any place that was increased more than others. I don't really keep track of specific areas and how the percentages are. Like I said, I hate to talk in percentages because the minute I do, somebody will look at their new value and say, oh, well, mine went up more than 7% or 8%, and mine went down 3%. So it's hard to say that because we do look at, we break the county into neighborhoods, and then we compare similar neighborhoods for market activity, and we make our adjustments based on that. And I'll be honest, I'm always conservative because if I'm at 100%, that means, half of them are over and half of them are under. So I'd rather be conservative.
And so you'd rather DOR be upset with you than the citizens of Clallam County?
Well, it's fair in my opinion, because, I don't want to overassess people. It's going to happen. I mean, obviously it's going to happen in mass appraisal. In some cases, it might be I'd rather be 1 or 2% rather than, 30%. So
Sure.
When we do make our adjustments, I'm always conservative. I know my analyst, he'll have numbers in his mind and I'm usually pulling him back 2 or 3%, just because I want to be conservative.
Mhm.
We always strive to be at 100%. Last year, I think our ratio was about 93% across the county. I do expect it to drop in the 80s this year. You know, we haven't done our sales reporting to the state yet, because that all happens after what I did yesterday and closing the rolls yesterday. Actually, your new values should be online at clallam.net within the next couple of days.
Okay.
So, and I believe the information there calculates it off, if you're looking at your taxes, it calculates it off of last year's levy. So that's not accurate. That's just an estimate.
Okay.
I anticipate a lot of levy rates dropping because of the increase in value we put on this year. Doesn't necessarily mean that each individual property will drop on their taxes, but the levy rate that they apply to the value, I do anticipate dropping. And, you know, I can't say what's going to happen in November when there's things voted on, because there's a few things coming on the ballot that could increase taxes. I know I dealt with the capital project levy from the city of Port Angeles School District last year, and that was a fairly huge impact, especially when people were looking at their values going up, because that first year out, it's pretty heavy. And from there on out, they'll use a budget, because we are a budget-driven system in Washington, which means that when the taxing districts give me their budgets, I take that value and I divide it into the budget to make a levy rate. So when you have more value and their budgets are limited by the 1%, usually that levy rate drops. And that's what I mean by, you know, the individual levy rates for your districts. Depending on which district you live in, of course, it's going to depend on what your levy rate is. Those levy rates are also online at clallam.net under the assessor's information. And there are some great connections to the Department of Revenue that makes pamphlets on different programs. And so I always recommend people look at property tax under Department of Revenue. I don't try to put those on the website anymore, because our links kept getting broken every time they would update one of those. So I just usually recommend people go directly to the Department of Revenue and pull the pamphlets that they have for different programs, because there's many of them out there. The senior program is one of our bigger ones that the senior and the current use, which the senior program, they can still make up to $40,000. That has changed in some other counties because they went to the more of the median income of each county. And the Assessors Association is the ones that really push that, because every county is so different. You can't compare King County to Ferry County, because it's the income and cost of living is so different. So they did increase some of the bigger counties' threshold for the senior program to up in the 50,000s. Our median income was still okay, so we stayed at the 40. They look at that every 5 years now, unless legislation changes something. So our senior program is very active, and I always recommend, if you have people that are having trouble, come and see us. You know, we'll help them go through the financial information that we need to put them on the program. They have to have a household income under 40,000 though. And there's a few deductions that they have increased this year from legislation. They're allowing you to use some other deductions. Used to be almost the only thing you could deduct was prescriptions. And like I said, there's just a handful of things that they allow us to deduct off of household disposable income. That's a little bit different than like what you finalize on your adjusted gross on your tax returns, because we have to add back in like Social Security, which a lot of people don't understand that, because they're looking at their adjusted gross income and it's under the 40, but then we have to add their Social Security back in. Sometimes that puts them over. So, you know, the programs there, I got a great crew here that's very willing to help them go through their financial information. And if we can put them on the program, we will. Again, that's a tax shift. Any kind of an exemption is a tax shift. The taxes don't go away because you're given an exemption. It just disperses differently to the remaining taxpayers. So
Got it.
same way with any like current use exemptions. When things come off the tax rolls, say the hospital district buys a house and it comes off the tax rolls, or the tribe takes something and puts it into trust, it comes off the tax rolls. Those taxes don't go away. They just get redistributed to the remaining taxpayers.
Okay. So Mike McAleer had a question. Mike? Dad?
Hi, Mike.
Yep. Hi. Does Happy Valley, Bell Hill fall in East Clallam or on the Squim roll?
I believe Happy Valley and Bell Hill are on the Squim roll. I
Okay.
have to look at my maps to make sure, but yes.
Is your map online?
No,
Okay.
it's not. We're going through a lot of computer changes here at the county. We don't have a GIS department in our office anymore. We have a centralized GIS, and that's just kind of up and running. They're having to reorganize the Esri product that they use. Esri has changed their platform quite a bit, so they're having to do some really big updating on that. Our whole IT is updating drastically. COVID has pushed that a lot. They did a great job. Don't get me wrong, even though I'm having technical difficulties, they did an awesome job. They got us up and running from home when it first happened, which I usually tried to not work from home. It was just better, and I have a tendency to work all the time if it's there. So I tried not to do that, but working from home worked out really well for the COVID. And my guys are still answering any phone calls. If you leave a message, they'll get right back to you as soon as they can. I still have half my office working at home, half my office working in the office, just so we keep a limited staff in here for keeping away from each other. You know, COVID has changed the world in the way we do things. As far as our physical inspections, we couldn't have 2 appraisers in the car for a while. So we do send that out for safety purposes. It's the world has changed. You know, when I was out there in the field, I didn't hesitate to jump a fence and go down a driveway. Now you might be met up with something that you don't want to see. So we're much more cautious. And there's cameras everywhere. That's good, because I wave at them, let them know what we're doing. I try to show them my tag, or I like them to see the cars. I made sure emblems were on all the cars. I get calls all the time because there's so much stuff going on in the county, especially in the more rural areas, where they get really nervous when people start driving around their neighborhoods. So don't ever hesitate to call us to make sure it's one of our guys. They should have cards and they should have name tags on them. I want to make sure that you know who's there and what they're doing there. They're just, sometimes they don't stop if it doesn't look like there's a lot of changes. They'll take a new picture maybe from the road. If there's anything that looks like it could have been updated or changed or deteriorated, or they're having problems, they usually try to knock on the door and ask questions. Like I said, I have probably the best crew I've ever had. They're very personable. They're just out there to do their job. And they can answer your questions too when they're in the field. And a lot of times that just relieves people's, you know, they're conscious of what's going on. Because I understand you don't want somebody driving around taking pictures of your house. That's why I want to make sure they know it's us. So.
Thank you. Jim, you have a question?
Well, I do. First of all, well, it's a question, but more of a kind of a process or system question. But first of all, I want to just give a shout out to Pam and her shop. She is an absolute wizard. I fancy myself reasonably good with numbers. Pam explained the very complicated nature of what work she and her workmates do, and it took me several times to get it, and I'm still not sure I've got it right. So Pam, my hat's off to you.
Thank you.
Pam, if you would kind of explain the difference between how the different property tax levies work. For instance, I think I remember that the state school levy, the property tax money that goes to the legislature for state schools, operates in a fashion kind of like, excuse me, the California system, what I call the California system, where it's a fixed percentage of whatever the property value is. And so if the property value goes up, the taxes go up, the property value goes down, the taxes go down. Whereas the county property tax levies operate on a fixed dollar basis. So in other words, the levy is a dollar amount, and then that dollar is divided in whatever taxing countywide into the overall county valuation. So the levy, the millage rate or the percentage, again, as applied to the property itself, goes up and down. So the valuation goes up, the percentage goes down, et cetera, et cetera. Pam, could you explain that so that I can try to understand it again?
The state school levy, that was a short-term, what I call a rate-driven system, which what you're talking
Right.
about with California.
Yeah, right.
That was a short-term, and then legislation did not renew that last year.
Okay.
So it should switch back to a budget-driven system as long as legislation doesn't change that. That was where part two state came into the last few years, is because they did increase that to meet up with the lawsuit they had, the McAleer lawsuit. That was supposed to be a way to fix that. I don't know that legislators anticipated the growth that we had in Washington state, which in my opinion should have gave them a little bit of a big bucket of money. So hopefully it cured their problem. That went into effect, I believe it became in 17, it became the bill. And I believe it was last year was the last year for it. I'm looking here, 22 is the last year, it looks like. So it was a 5-year fixed rate, where everybody else, every other taxing district without a vote of the people can only limit their increases to their actual budgets, 1% plus what we consider add-ons, which is that new construction, or increases in state assessed. And state assessed utilities are when the state actually values properties that cross county lines, like railroad tracks, transmission units, airplanes, airports, those kind of things that cross over county lines. They will actually value those. I don't value those locally. And I never know what those are going to be, because they also equalize those like they do the school levy. When I say equalize, then they use our ratios. So because we're joined on both sides by Jefferson County, it's pretty simple for us. Most counties have several counties that they have joint districts with. So anything that crosses over county lines like that, the state will value, and they'll send us those values. So if there's an increase in the value from the prior year, there's an additional levy increase that's allowable. So I call those add-ons. That and new construction is the only way that your taxing districts can increase their levy rate over that 1%. So without going to the vote of the people. Now, schools, of course, they go to the vote of the people for their enrichment levies and any capital projects, transportation levies, bonds. They have to go to the people to ask for them to accept those. Otherwise, the rest of them are limited to the 1% at this point. There's always, you know, better than probably most, because you keep up with legislation. Legislation is always trying to change things in the property tax realm. Actually, Washington state is probably one of the more uniform ways of taxation. Taxation across property tax is the same for personal property, mobile homes, for commercial. The levy rate is all the same for each one of those. So, and it's very uniform across the state like that. Because the remaining of them are budget driven. Like I said, when the taxing districts give me their budgets and their resolutions, I will do the calculations to make sure they stay within their limitations. I really personally don't have anything to do with taxes. I know I'm called the tax lady, but I don't collect a dime in this office, and it doesn't make any difference whether we raise or lower values to this office as far as how things are functioning. I just go off of the budgets themselves. So I always tell people, if you have issues with the way your taxing districts are spending your money, because that's where you have to show up. They all have to have public meetings to pass their budgets. It's a good idea to stay involved, because, you know, I'll hear the end part of it, like the school district. The Port Angelo School District was a big one last year. And that was one that I heard about a lot, because that increased a lot of people's taxes, you know, $1,000 or more. And that's a big jump for taxes themselves. And I can never tell you exactly what that's going to entail until I get those levies, or until I get those budgets from the taxing districts. That's why I told Colleen it'd be a really good idea to have me back maybe in January after I calculate those. I can give you a better idea what that looks like. But you're right, the school was a short term unless legislation renews it. the Assessors Association is definitely opposed to going to a rate-based system. The budget-based system is much more fair, and you can anticipate a little bit better what's going to happen. Because, you know, when your values go up, doesn't necessarily always mean your taxes will go up in the same fashion. I can't tell you that until I see what happens with the levies this year, though. Because as soon as I say that, they'll pass something that'll blow them out of the water.
Well, Pam, I'm totally with you on that one, because if we had a rate-based system right now with the valuation jumps that we're seeing that you've been describing, you know, we'd be looking at torches and pitchforks, I'm sure.
Oh my God, I would be strung alive. I would be strung up. Because you're right. If it did work that way, your taxes would be going up considerably. You know, California has Prop 13, which they put a limitation on the values instead of a limitation on the taxes. Personally, I think it should be the other way around, like we do. I know 1% is a little tough because it's hard to keep up with inflation. So there's always, you know, they can ask the people to increase that. We have different limitations, and statutory limitations are in law on how much each taxing district can actually ask for. They could go to the people if they're below it, like, you know, occasionally you'll see EMS levies, for one thing, they're maxed out at 50 cents. And they'll start dropping in that levy rate. So you see the fire districts go out back out to renew that. I believe Fire District 3 may be asking for something this year. I've heard some talk about that and seen some things in the paper. I never really know until they actually file the petition with the auditor's office to know what they're going to be asking for. So that's why I say I can't tell you what's going to happen with taxes at this point, because we still have a November election to go on, and then we have the calculations to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Pam. Kai, you have a question? I will ask Kai's question for him. Oh, here we go.
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself here. Yes, if you can tell us in the aggregate what valuation in the county of existing construction has increased from 20 to 21. I find that always helpful to keep in mind, because I often have people call me and say, oh my God, my valuation went up by 10%. I said, well, compare it to what the average went up, because your tax rate won't go up by that much. It depends what your valuation goes up in comparison to the aggregate. So do you have that number already for the whole county?
I do have the valuation. I don't have the percentages, Kai. Last year, the total value of the county was 10.6 billion.
Uh-huh.
This year, the total value of the county is 11.9 billion.
Okay, so that's a little bit over 12%. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Kai.
Great. So there have been several questions about properties that are exempt from paying taxes. Can you talk about that? You talked about the senior exemptions, but what percentage is exempt based on having a senior exemption? What percentage of the properties are exempt for nonprofits? And if you can speak to that. And then also there was a question about tribal exemptions. What percentage of the county is tribal property?
You know, I don't have the percentages, Colleen. I can tell you that when the tribe, any of the tribes buy a piece of property, they don't own it in fee a lot of times yet, and they can't put it into the trust. When they put it into the federal trust, that's when it comes off the tax rolls. So I'm going to use Jamestown for an example, because they have a lot of property throughout the entire county. Most of your other tribal units are more on the reservation. But, you know, like when Jamestown builds something, until they get an exemption on it, they pay full taxes just like everybody else does. So when they put it into the federal trust, that's when it comes off the tax rolls. I know the golf course is one of them. When they first got that, it wasn't in trust, but it is now, so it came off the tax rolls. The casino's never been on the tax rolls. That went into trust right away, but they own properties all throughout the county. They do have their own low-income housing authority with that tribe. So they will notify me if there's homes that are on their housing authority that I do remove, just like you would if it was a state housing authority. So I don't have percentages. We do have several different entities that are exempt. All of your taxing districts, like your hospitals, what they own, they go exempt when they purchase new stuff. The current use exemptions, which is your timber exemption, or your forest land, your agricultural, your open space. Forest land is pennies on the dollar. So is agricultural as far as market goes. Open space is a percentage of your value is removed for tax purposes. And that's done on a point system, depending on what is affecting that property, say a pond, wetlands, just different things that would affect that. That's done through community development. They make those determinations on the point system, and that's in our code. It's the public benefit rating system. That's how the open space is. As far as there's an exemption for new construction that allows people that are increasing their value to their home by new construction, they can get a 3-year exemption on the new value if they apply for the exemption prior to finishing construction. So I always tell people to apply for it right away, because the calculations, we have to do the inspection and we have to do the calculations on what would be allowable for an exemption. And that's only for 3 years. There are other exemptions out there that our county's not using yet, but I probably will someday.
So can you speak a little bit more to that last one? So if you are, is that just if you're adding on to your house, you get
Yes.
a 3-year, but not if you build a shop, for example?
Well, the laws, I have to get some clarity on that, because that didn't used to be in the exemption. I believe that's one of the new things that legislation looked at, was to allow other structures. I think that's probably because a lot of the bigger counties are going to an easier way of the ADUs, or the auxiliary dwellings, for housing shortages. So I think they're trying to encourage that. I know the city of Seattle, of course, they're almost letting anybody put a ADU anywhere in there now, because they have such a housing shortage. So they're trying to extend that program out, and I believe they extended it out. I haven't looked at it right now because the legislation doesn't apply yet to me, but they were allowing different things. But it is increasing the value of your home by fixing it up, new construction. Those are allowable to go up to 3 years for the new construction portion of the house itself. It used to be just the main structure, but they're expanding that out a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Can you expand a little bit more on nonprofits that don't pay property taxes? I know you talked about Peninsula Housing Authority, and I see Colleen Robinson noted that nonprofit affordable housing builders do not pay property tax on undeveloped land. So is that like if I was a for-profit builder and I designate a particular parcel to be that I'm going to build it for affordable housing, do they somehow go to you and get an exemption for their property tax?
Any of those kind of exemptions are done through the Department of Revenue. They'll have to apply with the Department of Revenue for an exemption or a partial exemption. A lot of your low income housing, if you have big units and a portion of them are low income and a portion of them are for profit, they may only get a percentage of that exemption, but they do apply to the Department of Revenue for that. They don't apply for that with me. And there's all kinds of different federal things that go along with the low income housing too. And sometimes they'll change every year because they have to report back to the Department of Revenue on, say, 80% of their property is low income, and they have to prove that those are low income. And they'll get maybe 80% reduction or an 80% exemption. They may not get an entire exemption. Some of your bigger units, if they have a beauty shop or a laundromat, things that are actually making money, those might be pulled out of the exemption. Churches, they have to apply with the Department of Revenue. So any of those like that, I don't deal with those. I just get the response from the Department of Revenue on whether they qualified or not, because they have to supply them with a lot of information. So there's on that.
What are generally the rules on that? If you're a 501c3 and you own property, then you can get an exemption, or is it just religious organizations and affordable housing?
You can apply for different kinds of property. We've had, the Peninsula Playhouse, I think it was, at one time, they were for nonprofit. So nonprofit entities can apply. There's like I said, on the Department of Revenue, they have some great literature on many different programs. Some of them we don't have in Clallam County yet. We will probably someday, you know, refurbishing 10-year exemption from when you bring up an area to that was, you know, bad, and they fix it all up. There's exemptions that you can apply for that. I know the bigger communities have done that. We have not yet. I've had a little bit of investigation about possible low-income housing, working with, you know, the cities and things like that. They haven't done it yet, though. I can see where that will be in the future, probably, because our housing needs are way outweigh what we have available.
Mm-hmm.
But those are all done through the state. I don't make those determinations. I just apply them when the state gives them to me.
Okay. Okay. And so I see Andra has a question, then I have one too.
Okay.
Actually, it's just kind of a comment, and I am in no way an expert in nonprofit exemptions, but with the Squim Food Bank back in 2017, we purchased some property, and it does go through the Department of Revenue, and there are, you know, depending on what you're going to use that property for, determines the level of exemption. So I just wanted to kind of just share that I don't think you can just hold the property and just not do anything with it. And on our end and what we were using it for, we had to explain what that property use would be used for in order to receive the exemption. So I don't know if that helps any, Colleen, with what your question was.
Yeah.
But
Did you get a full exemption or a partial?
so we received a
Okay.
full exemption.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we have 2 parcels that we pay. We do pay, but it's dollars, just, you know.
Okay.
So you know, just less than, I don't know, it's minimal, just a few dollars a year. But you know, they came and inspected the property to make sure that what we said we were going to use it for is what it was to be used for. We couldn't just hold it and not use it. So, you know, we use it as part of our work. And so we receive the full exemption on that piece of property.
We do sometimes,
Okay.
Colleen, there's a building, like say a church, and they have their parking lot, and then they have this excess land, another parcel. That other parcel may not be exemptable
Okay.
because it's not being used for church needs. So and I'm just using that as an example, but they do investigate what you're going to be using it for, and it either has to be a nonprofit, low income. Their qualifications have to be met, and you may not get it on all of it.
Okay. What
That is-
about go? Sorry, Andra. Go ahead, Andra. Let's see.
No, I just want to say that's what we came. That is the experience that we had. Yes.
Okay. And so what about the multifamily tax exemption? So that's in the city of Port Angeles, that it's a program that the city of Port Angeles has adopted, trying to entice developers to build multifamily housing units. I believe it's more than 4 units. And if they build, if they build, then they get 8 years of property tax exemptions on the improvement, but so the land property tax continues. And if they do a certain percentage, I think it's 20% is low income or affordable housing, then they get 12 years of a property tax exemption for all of the improvement.
That's one of those exemptions that I said we haven't had any yet. So they
Oh,
haven't.
you haven't had any yet.
No. So that was
That's
one of my, I
crazy.
know I've had
Mhm.
questions on it, but nobody's applied or proceeded with that one yet.
I
do-
know there's folks trying to make that happen.
Right. I've talked to people about the different, and the legislation's trying to open that up more. They're trying to get people to build and investors to participate because of the housing shortages we have. I mean, we have it here, but the urban areas, it's so much worse. You know, they're trying to get them to go in and refurbish these old places and make them livable for low-income housing or just housing in general. So yes, there are those exemptions out there on the legislative level. I don't have any at this point. but I think we will someday.
Okay, okay. So my last question in this realm is, can you give us your guess would be better than ours, obviously. What percentage of properties, excluding like DNR land and Olympic National Park and Olympic National Forest, that kind of thing, what percentage do you think is exempt? What percentage of the properties are actually being taxed?
You know, I don't have that. I honestly don't, because there's so many different exemptions out there. You know, I can try to pull some queries for our next one and see if I can get a better idea on exemptions. I can't even look right now, but to give you a percentage, I always hesitate to talk in any kind of percentages, you know that. But
So
I can look at that because I know we have several entities that are exempt. And like taxing districts, those like the taxes on the courthouse here, there is none. The city doesn't have any. The hospital, those are all exempt from the entities themselves because they are taxing district, public taxing districts. So and every day we're adding those, and we get the Department of Revenue exemptions come through all the time too. So people apply with those. I know several years ago when they built that big low income housing project on the east side of Sequim, we had picked it up new construction, and then we got a notification within a couple months after that, the whole building went exempt. So that was several $1 million off the tax rolls that we had put on the tax rolls. So, you know, that does happen too. Sometimes we don't always get the notification in a timely manner because of the application process, or maybe a glitch that they missed some documentation they had to add later. So a lot of times I will get those exemptions after they've been put on the tax rolls.
I remember when the legislature was debating about the levee cliff and McAleer and all that business, there was a lot of conversation around the number of senior exempt properties, that if that were somehow handled differently, that it would not be nearly the impact to those that are fully taxed. Do you have any information on the number of properties in Clallam County that are do have that senior exemption? Is it a lot, or is it?
It usually runs about 2,000 to 2,500. You know, everybody changes every year. You know, new people become available for it. The actual exemption, you have to be 62 years of age the year that you receive the exemption. And a couple of years ago, they also changed the occupancy ruling on it. Actually, they changed it 2 or 3 times. It's back down to where you have to occupy the home 6 months or more in the assessment year. So to actually get the benefit in 2022, you would have had to occupy your home for a minimum of 6 months in 21 to qualify for that program. Used to not be quite like that. They've changed that. And then again, the $40,000 limitation is just your excess levies, which are usually your bonds and M&Os that are voted on. They're not exempt from your regular levies. They do, and at the $40,000 level, they don't get any kind of reduction in value either. The other 2 levels will actually remove a portion of the value for tax purposes, which is 35 and under and 30 and under. Those actually remove a portion of your value for tax purposes. Plus, you freeze your value at the time you qualify, so it won't go up. It could go down unless you do some new construction to your house. So say you have a $300,000 house and you make a big improvement to it. We always wonder kind of how you can afford to make that big of improvement when your income is low. So we do question those. And I'll be honest with you, I'm very strict with all the exemption because it is a tax shift. I make visits constantly to make sure people are living in their homes, that they're not being rented, and I remove them immediately, and I will go back 5 years. Wow. So it can be pretty devastating, but you know, I take this pretty seriously. Like I said, it shifts the taxes. So anytime you got a tax shift on people, I want to be fair. So I'm not always popular when I do that, but it's up to the taxpayer to notify us if there's a change in their income or a change in their marital status, or most, I'd say 98% of them are right above board, but you have a few that are very creative in their finances, and we try very hard to make sure that the program's used properly. It's there to keep people in their homes. It's not there to shift your taxes onto somebody else.
Audrey has a question.
Thank you, Colleen. And first of all, I just want to thank Pam for just a well-run shop, and your staff is always so responsive and so helpful. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Audrey. You've been great to work with. I have to tell you, my staff talks about how great Forks is to work with.
Thank you. My question was about personal property taxes. And so how often are those values adjusted?
Every year.
How do you go about that? What's
They're
that?
they're every year. Personal property is kind of a thorn in my side because it is a self-reporting system. So we rely on the taxpayer to let us know what that is. With any self-reporting system, you're not going to get it all reported. We try to do discovery when we see new business go in, because that is their business information that we're looking at. They report that to us, and we use more of a bookkeeping situation with that, because the state gives us our rates. So when they report what kind of equipment they have, or office equipment, excavators, if they're running a business, they pay personal property tax on that every year. And we do redo those every year. They're supposed to report those every year. We'll send out the old listing that they gave us. And that information is all confidential. I can't share personal property listings because it could impact a business being able to do business the way they want to or need to competitively. So those are one of the few things actually in my office that are confidential. Most information that the assessor's office has is all public information. So I try to put as much information out there as I can. I know some people don't necessarily agree with me on putting all the information, the pictures and stuff out there, but we use those for the appraisal process, and they're public information. If you went through a public records request, I'd have to give them to you anyway. So it just makes us more transparent on what we're doing. But the personal property, they do that every year. They report it every year, and they're penalized if they don't report it.
How do you find out there's a new business out there? You said, is that through UBIs?
There's many different ways we look at it. And I'll be really honest with you, with COVID, I've asked my personal property representative to be a little more lenient, especially when you got a new restaurant opening up that they can't even open the doors. I say, let's wait till next year to look at them, because like I said, personal property is a little bit of a thorn in my side because it is self-reporting and you're paying taxes over and over again on the same equipment. But it's state law, and I follow the law. But they do it by discovery, by UBIs, by new ads in the paper. One of our appraisers has seen something that wasn't there before. We'll send them notification and ask them to list. When they actually get their business license, the Department of Revenue gives them a package, and in that package it tells them to report their personal property listings to the assessor. Doesn't always happen. Some people are great about it, but sometimes we have to hound them for those information. And most business owners don't care for the personal property tax. So we do hear that a lot, but that's how we get the information. It's a self-reporting system. Again, I have a little bit of a problem with self-reporting systems because it isn't necessarily fair to everybody that doesn't report.
Yeah. So what about depreciating values of the personal property? Does
that's done in the tables at the Department of Revenue. Some equipment or personal property depreciates a lot faster than others. Technology is one of them. They depreciate within the first few years because you can't keep up with that. Like a big piece of equipment doesn't depreciate as fast because those will last 40 years. So different depreciation tables on different kinds of equipment, depending on the longevity of the equipment itself. So those tables are actually done through the Department of Revenue.
And is that rate similar to like the levy amount?
It's exactly the same.
Okay.
The levy amount for all property in Washington is uniform. So when I calculate a levy rate for a district, that applies to all property, real, personal, and it's that way across the state. There is no different levy rates for different kinds of property. I think,
but it's not vehicles.
No, vehicles. The only vehicles that we will do is your mobile homes, which are licensed. Park models are always a bone of contention because there's no building permits required for them. There's no moving permits required for them. Those are discovery only. Usually we physically see them. Some of your individual people that do a lot of them, they'll let us know. Like I have a couple of trailer parks that have a lot of park models in them, and they'll always let us know, because when we pick them up, if we don't know who the owners are, the trailer park gets the bill. So they want to make sure that we have the correct information. Park models are taxable from property tax once they're attached to the property. Then that could be a sewer hookup, an electrical hookup, because park models are called RVs, but they're not meant to be using on a weekend excursion. They are more of a permanent kind of a property. They are not meant to be lived in year round. But I know there was some bad information going out there that you didn't have to pay property tax on them, but you do. As soon as they become attached to the property, they go on the tax rolls, as long as we have the discovery of them. Those are a little harder to track. I know the county's talking about doing some new code for park models and tiny homes, because a lot of those tiny homes are under 400 square feet, and they don't start out to be a tiny home. They start out to be a shed, and next thing you know, they're a tiny home. So those are a little bit harder to follow too.
Cindy had a question, and then I think we'll call it a morning.
Thanks, Pam, for a great presentation. Can you talk a little bit about open space taxation, and is that shift made up by others, like other neighbors, that kind of thing?
Yes, anything that you're not paying market value on and you're getting an exemption for is a tax shift. So open space itself is done by the public benefit rating system, and that is done through the Department of Community Development. They tell us how many points they get, and each point affects how much of a reduction you get in your value. So what we do on those is you reduce the value for tax purposes. Timber, which is your forest land properties, like I said, they're pennies on the dollar. You could have $1 million piece of timber property and maybe your value is only $1,200 because they value the trees. That's because it takes so many years to harvest those trees, and they get that tax when they get the harvest tax. So they get a huge property tax reduction for that kind of thing. Same way with agriculture. It's to promote agricultural use in properties and keep these bigger open space farms able to, any of you that know what a farmer does, they work their tail off. It's hard work. So they give those exemptions for those also. If they remove them from those programs, the open space and agricultural, they have to pay 7 years back taxes on the removed portion of it, plus penalties and interest. On the forest land, they go back 10 years at current value. So I always tell developers, if they're removing something that big, they might want to do it at the time of purchase, because when we go in there and they've now made these into individual lots, and it was in timberland before, you take a $500,000 piece of property, and now we have $100,000 pieces of property, individual lots. That's what they're going to be paying the back taxes on in timber and forest land. So I always make sure that they have that information. I got great current use people. Try to explain that information to them so they don't get surprised later. Does that answer that for you, Kip?
Cindy?
Cindy, did it answer for you?
Yes, Pam, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Pam, you do such a nice job. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And I know being the tax collector is not an easy thing.
That's a treasure.
You're probably one of the most respected tax collectors out there, much more so than we read about in the Bible. So, so thank you for everything and your thorough presentation this morning. And we'll have you back in January so you can give us a little more information. Hopefully we can see your smiling face and some slides.
All righty. Well, thank you guys for having me. And anytime you get questions, my door is always open. I have my cell phone and my work phone. I try to keep in contact with anybody. So don't ever hesitate to call if you got questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Pam.
Thanks
Okay.
for having me, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to stop recording.